This GeographyBurst video focuses on
extreme weather in the UK. You should use pages 32 to 37 of your textbook to support this video. We will be looking at the types of extreme weather experienced in the UK, why the UK experiences extreme weather in the first place, and looking at our case study for extreme weather in the UK, which is the Somerset Levels floods of 2014. So firstly, the types of extreme weather that the UK experiences. Firstly, thunderstorms. Usually following a period of very hot weather, thunderstorms can provide torrential downpours of rain that can cause flash floods in areas. As well as this prolonged rainfall, this is rainfall over a long period of time, which can cause rivers to slowly rise and eventually burst their banks. It's most common during the late winter and the early spring due to the added level of water that melting snow provides. Drought and extreme heat are extended periods of hot and dry weather, meaning that rivers can simply dry up and reservoirs that are used to store water for agriculture or drinking water to fall dangerously low. As well as this, high temperatures can be deadly, especially to the very young, the very old, or ill people. For instance, in 2003, the worst heat wave in the last 500 years was recorded across Europe. Heavy snow and extreme cold can particularly affect the north of the UK. When they happen, they cause huge disruption to transport. And finally, strong winds. During the autumn and early winter, the UK is often hit by the remnants of hurricanes that make their way across the Atlantic Ocean from the Americas. When the strong winds hit the UK, they often do damage to power lines. They can force bridges to close because of the possibility of danger. They can cause huge waves along the coast, which can be destructive. And of course, if they knock over trees, that will certainly disrupt any rail lines or roads which they happen to fall across. So this brings us to the question, why does the UK experience such a differing range of extreme weathers? It's because the British Isles are located at what we call a weather roundabout. Its position in the world means that it gets weather from all over the world. The meeting of different air masses with different temperatures and different levels of moisture leads to very different weather depending on which air mass is affecting the UK the most. So for instance, on the map here you can see that from the north, from the Arctic, we can often get heavy snow and cold weather. From the east, we can often get severe weather from Siberia, such as the beast from the east, which caused very, very low temperatures and snowfall in the early part of 2018. The air that travels across the Atlantic, as previously stated, can often bring storms and heavy rain as the remnants of hurricanes make their way across the ocean. And from the south, from southern Europe and Africa, very warm weather can be brought, which can bring heat waves and even drought.
And this brings us to our case study of extreme weather in the UK, the Somerset Levels floods of 2014. Firstly, let's examine the causes of this event. When we say causes, we mean what made the event happen. Firstly, it was the wettest January in over 100 years, since records began. 350 millimetres of rain fell in January and February. That's about 100 millimetres more than the average for that time of year. Secondly, several low-pressure weather systems were brought in from the Atlantic Ocean. That brought lots of moisture. Storm surges were responsible for pushing water up the Bristol Channel. That's where a lot of the rivers in the area have their mouths, so the water was not able to exit the river, so stayed in the river channel. And finally, the rivers in the region had not been dredged for over 20 years. Dredging is when the bottom of the river is deepened, allowing it to hold more water in its channel before it overtops the banks. So some of the impacts of the Somerset level floods, first of all, social impacts, which of course affect people, were that power supplies were disrupted. 600 houses had to be evacuated for the safety of the inhabitants, and 16 farms were submerged in the area.
Economically, of course, affecting money and business, the estimated cost of the damage was more than £10 million. The Bristol to Taunton railway line was damaged, which stopped commuters from getting to work. And more than 14,000 hectares of farmland was underwater for 3 to 4 weeks, meaning that the farmers in the area will have lost out significantly. Environmentally, floodwater was stagnant. It had been sitting still for a long time, so it had lost a lot of its oxygen content. So before it was pumped back into the rivers, had to be re-oxygenated. Floodwater itself contained pollutants such as raw sewage, oil, and chemicals. As well as this, a huge amount of debris was carried by the floodwaters, so was left when the floodwaters were cleared, leaving a large amount of debris to be cleared from the land.
And finally, the responses to this disaster. Firstly, immediate responses, which are all about saving people's lives and keeping people safe. In this disaster, local volunteers helped those who were less fortunate, so the less able and the elderly. And instead of using cars, which is the normal mode of transport for this region, small boats and even canoes were used to help commuters to get to and from work, children to and from school, and people who needed to pick up essential supplies to and from the shops. In the long-term responses, and of course long-term responses mean about restoring normality, Somerset County Council announced a £20 million flood action plan which promised to do several things. Firstly, to dredge 8 kilometres of the River Tone and River Parrett, raise the height of roads, give villages at risk individual flood defences, and invest in more pumping stations, as well as considering building a tidal barrage at Bridgewater. Geography. Know your world.